Chosen one. You need to save this person immediately because they are trying to contact you last 4 days. And this message is reaching you now because heaven will not let this moment pass in silence. Do not brush this aside. Do not tell yourself you will come back to it later. Something urgent has been moving in the spirit around you. And the reason your heart has felt unsettled is because someone connected to your path has been crying out in a way your natural mind could not fully understand. This is not random emotion. This is not ordinary heaviness. This is divine interruption. Michael says the pressure you have felt is confirmation that your name has been called into a serious assignment. And the time to recognize it is now. There is a person whose strength has been fading behind closed doors. A person who has tried to hold everything together while quietly breaking inside. And their need has risen before God. You were not brought here to be entertained. You were brought here to be awakened. This is one of those moments when heaven does not simply comfort you. It commissions you. It places weight on your spirit because your obedience is tied to someone else's breakthrough. You may not yet know every detail, but you do not need every detail to understand the urgency. God often reveals the burden before he reveals the full picture, because he is looking for willingness before explanation. And right now, your willingness matters. Your sensitivity matters. Your response matters. The door for this assignment is open now, but it will not stay open forever. That is why this word feels so direct. That is why it feels like it found you instead of you finding it. Because it did. Michael says this is not the hour to hesitate, shrink back, or question whether you are truly the one being addressed. You are. If this message is speaking to your spirit, comment. I will not ignore this call. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel. And share it with someone who may need this same confirmation. Because what heaven is releasing in this hour is too urgent to keep to yourself. For the past few days, something has been shifting around you in a way you could not fully explain. It was subtle at first, almost easy to dismiss. A weight in your chest, a restlessness in your spirit, a quiet sense that something was not settled. You may have tried to move past it. You may have told yourself it was only stress, only exhaustion, only the pressure of too many thoughts. But deep inside, you knew this was different. It did not feel like ordinary worry. It felt like a signal. It felt like your spirit was picking up on something before your mind had language for it. Michael says this is how heaven often begins to stir the called before the assignment is revealed. There is an inner trembling, a holy unease, a sense that you are being pulled into awareness because something important is unfolding just beyond what your natural eyes can see. What you have been feeling is not random, and it is not meaningless. It is connected to someone whose cry has been echoing in the unseen realm. Someone whose pain has brushed against your spirit even before the full truth reached your understanding. That is why peace has felt interrupted. That is why your thoughts have drifted back to certain people, certain impressions, certain moments you could not shake. Heaven has been tapping gently, then more firmly, trying to wake you up to the seriousness of this hour. You were never meant to remain numb in this moment. You were meant to notice. You were meant to feel the interruption. You were meant to recognize that the stirring inside you was not sent to trouble you without purpose, but to prepare you to move with discernment and compassion. There are times when God allows your spirit to sense the burden before he explains the assignment. Because if he showed you everything at once, the weight of it might overwhelm you. So instead, he lets you feel the urgency first. He lets the atmosphere around you change. He lets your soul become alert. And then, in the right moment, the message comes clearly. That is what is happening now. The uneasiness was preparation. The heaviness was preparation. The repeated inner pull was preparation. You have been standing closer to this divine moment than you realized. Scripture says, "Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth." 1 Samuel 3:10. Kiafe. That is the posture heaven is calling out of you now, not panic, not confusion, but readiness, a listening heart, a willing spirit, a soul that does not run from the weight of divine responsibility. So do not dismiss what you have felt. Do not minimize the burden, and do not call ordinary what heaven has marked as sacred. Something real is pressing in, and your spirit knew it before your mind could explain it. Tell me in the comments. Have you been sensing that something was shifting around you lately, somewhere right now? A soul connected to your path is growing weaker under a weight they were never meant to carry alone. This is not a small burden. This is not a passing sadness that will fade on its own. This is the kind of weariness that settles deep into a person when they have fought too long in silence, smiled too long through pain, and waited too long for someone to notice that they are not as strong as they look. Heaven is not interrupting you over something minor. The urgency surrounding this message is severe because the situation is difficult. There is someone who has been holding on by threads, someone whose heart has been stretched to its limit, someone who has reached that dangerous place where exhaustion begins to whisper that nothing will change and no one is truly coming. Michael says this is why the call has become louder. This is why the pressure in the spirit has intensified. This is why you were not allowed to remain at ease, because while you were trying to name what you were feeling, another person was trying not to collapse under the invisible war around them. And what makes this even more serious is that they may not know how to ask for help in a way others can understand. Their mouth may be quiet, but their spirit has been crying. Their body may still be moving, but inwardly they are drained. Their eyes may still be open, but hope has been flickering. Do you understand how urgent this is? This is not only about comfort. This is about intervention. This is about responding before the darkness around them hardens into something heavier, colder, and harder to reach. There are moments in life when one act of obedience can alter the direction of an entire story. And this is one of those moments. You are being pulled into a divine crossing point, a holy intersection between another person's desperation and heaven's mercy. The cry has already reached the throne. The tears have already been counted. As Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." That verse is not distant right now. It is alive in this hour. But notice this, God often sends his closeness through a person willing to move, through a voice, through a reaching hand, through someone who does not ignore the stirring. That is why this message found you. Because someone is closer to the edge than they have let anyone see. And your obedience may become the very thing that proves to them they were not abandoned after all. You were not brought into this moment by accident. And you were not drawn to this message merely to observe it from a distance. There is a reason heaven is speaking to you with such precision. And it is because your life has never been ordinary in the spirit. Even in seasons when everything around you felt hidden, delayed, or misunderstood, long before this hour arrived, God had already marked you as someone who could carry weight without breaking, someone who could hear beneath the noise, someone who could respond when others remained asleep. That is why this assignment has found you. Not because you are perfect, not because you have never been tired, but because there is something in your spirit that has been forged through fire, and heaven recognizes what it has built in you. Michael says this is the hour to stop seeing yourself through the lens of past weakness and start recognizing what the hand of God has been shaping all along. You have been trained in places no one applauded. You have been strengthened in battles no one fully understood. You have been separated, stretched, and refined, not to be cast aside, but to be prepared. Prepared for moments when another life would tremble on the edge and your sensitivity would matter. Prepared for moments when your discernment would become a lifeline. Prepared for moments when obedience would matter more than explanation. This is one of those moments, and that is why the pressure around this word feels so intense. Heaven does not place this kind of urgency on someone who has no role to play. You are being addressed because you do. Scripture gives us the picture clearly when Samuel first heard the voice calling him in the night. He did not yet understand the fullness of what was happening. But the call was real before the understanding came. And when he answered, "Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth," 1 Samuel 3:10, Gava, he stepped into the beginning of something bigger than himself. That is the threshold before you now. You may not have every detail. You may not yet see the whole path, but the call is still real. The assignment is still real. The urgency is still real. And your response will determine whether you step fully into what heaven is requiring of you in this hour. So do not reduce this to emotion. Do not dismiss it as a coincidence. Do not talk yourself out of what your spirit already knows. God does not waste sacred interruptions, and He does not summon people without purpose. You were set apart for this kind of moment. You were trusted with this kind of weight. And now the question is not whether heaven has spoken. It has. The question is whether you will answer before the moment passes and the assignment moves under the shadow of delay. This is where the message becomes impossible to soften. Because what is at stake now is too serious for gentle delay. You cannot treat this hour casually. You cannot push this stirring aside and assume it will wait for a more convenient moment. It will not. Michael says there are times when heaven whispers, and there are times when heaven sounds an alarm. This is an alarm. This is not a suggestion wrapped in spiritual language. This is a summons. This is a warning. This is a divine interruption sent to shake you out of hesitation before hesitation costs more than you realize. Someone connected to your path is not standing in a mild season of discomfort. They are in a critical place. They are weary in a way that has reached the marrow. They are vulnerable in a way that others cannot see. They have been trying to hold themselves together. But the cracks are widening. Their silence has been hiding the seriousness of their condition. But heaven has seen what people missed. Heaven has heard what others overlooked. And now heaven is pressing this word into your spirit because delay is no longer harmless. Delay has consequences. Delay gives darkness more room. Delay allows confusion to grow roots. Delay lets hopelessness speak longer than it should. That is why this message carries fire in it. That is why it refuses to leave you comfortable. You are being called to move before the window narrows, before the ache deepens, before what could have been reached becomes harder to touch. Do not say, "I will do it later." Do not say, "Maybe tomorrow." Do not say, "I need a little more time to think." Not this time. Not in this hour. Not when a soul is hanging in the balance. Michael says obedience in this moment must be swift. Because there are seasons when speed itself becomes part of the assignment. There are moments when your willingness to respond quickly is the very thing that breaks the pressure gathering around another person's life. You have to understand this with full seriousness. You are not being warned because heaven wants to frighten you. You are being warned because heaven wants to use you before it is too late. The enemy thrives in postponement. Darkness gains strength when the called remain passive, and one of the greatest traps in urgent spiritual moments is the lie that waiting a little longer will not matter. It matters. It matters more than you know. Because every hour you remain frozen is another hour that person remains buried under a weight they were never meant to carry alone. Every hour you stay silent is another hour their soul wonders whether help is ever going to come. Every hour you talk yourself out of moving is another hour. The battle around them keeps raging without the relief heaven intended to send through you. Let that truth hit deeply. This is not pressure without purpose. This is responsibility. Sacred responsibility. You were not awakened to this word so you could admire it. You were awakened to it so you could act on it. And if your spirit feels the intensity increasing, it is because the assignment is near. The need is real. And the time is shorter than it appears. Revelation 3:8 says, "I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it," KJV. But an open door still must be walked through. A divine opening still requires a human yes. And that yes cannot live only in emotion. It must become movement. It must become courage. It must become action. So hear this clearly. This is the moment to stop circling the call and step into it. Stop negotiating with fear. Stop feeding your hesitation. Stop waiting for everything to feel easy, obvious, and comfortable. This assignment was never going to arrive wrapped in comfort. It arrived wrapped in urgency because urgency is part of the sign. Move while the door is open. Reach while the burden is being revealed. Respond while heaven is still placing this weight on your heart. Because what you do next will not only reveal your discernment, it will reveal your obedience. And in this hour, obedience is everything. There is a reason this message keeps returning to the same truth with such force. You are not merely witnessing someone else's pain from afar. You are being positioned as the answer heaven has chosen to send into it. Think about the weight of that for a moment. While they were crying in silence, while they were carrying what felt unbearable, while they were asking God for one sign that they had not been forgotten, your name was already being moved into place in the Spirit. This is why the connection feels so charged. This is why the message refuses to let you stay detached. You are not reading empty words. You are standing inside a divine appointment. Michael says heaven does not reveal an assignment like this unless it has already prepared the vessel meant to carry it. And that is what makes this hour so sacred. You may have wondered why certain burdens touched you more deeply than they touched others. Why certain cries seemed to echo in your chest. Why certain moments in life trained your heart to notice pain that other people overlook. Now you are seeing the reason. God was not only bringing you through your own process, He was shaping in you the kind of compassion that can recognize a breaking point before it becomes visible. He was building in you the kind of discernment that can feel when a soul is running out of strength. He was teaching your spirit how to respond, not with fear, not with pride, but with holy sensitivity. That is why this is not random. You are the answer to a prayer that was prayed with trembling. You are the response to tears no one else saw. You are the living proof that when heaven hears, heaven also sends. And what makes this even more powerful is that your role may not look dramatic in the eyes of the world. It may begin with a reaching hand, a message, a step of obedience, a simple act of presence. But do not underestimate what God can pour through one obedient response. Some miracles begin quietly. Some rescues begin with a whisper. Some turning points begin when one person decides not to ignore what the Spirit has made impossible to ignore. Michael says this is one of those moments. This is where obedience becomes a doorway, where compassion becomes movement, where what has been sensed in the unseen finally takes shape in the natural. I have set before thee an open door, and no man can shut it. Revelation 3:8. EKV. That word is alive over this moment because heaven has already opened something in front of you. But you must walk through it. You must not stand at the threshold and call it enough to feel deeply. Feeling is not the assignment. Responding is, and once you understand that, everything sharpens. The burden makes sense. The urgency makes sense. The repeated stirring makes sense. You were not given this weight to carry it passively. You were given this weight so you would move under it with courage. Tell me this in your spirit before you go any further. What if the reason you were led here was that heaven trusted you with someone's turning point? You are not being sent into this moment alone. And that matters more than you realize. The weight of this assignment is real. But so is the strength being released to help you carry it. Heaven never calls without also covering. Never sends without also sustaining. Never reveals a burden without preparing grace to meet it. That is why you must not let fear convince you that you are insufficient for what is unfolding now. Michael says, the same God who stirred your spirit is the God who will steady your steps. The same hand that awakened you to this need will also guide you in how to respond. You do not have to force clarity out of panic. You do not have to create power out of yourself. You do not have to be everything. You only have to be willing. That willingness is what heaven can move through. That surrender is what opens the way. There are unseen forces already at work around you, clearing resistance, aligning timing, softening what seemed closed, and making room for a breakthrough you cannot yet fully see. What looked complicated a moment ago will not remain as impossible as it appeared, because when God ordains an encounter, He also moves ahead of it. He prepares the atmosphere. He touches hearts before words are spoken. He creates openings where human logic saw walls. This is why you must quiet the voice that says you are on your own in this. You are not. Divine help is closer than your fear. Heavenly support is stronger than your uncertainty. And even now, as this message reaches deeper into your spirit, things are shifting in the unseen. Courage is rising. Discernment is sharpening. Resistance is being broken. The path is not becoming clear because you figured everything out. It is becoming clear because heaven is going before you. Isaiah 4:1-10 says, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee, be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee." KJV. Hold that closely now. Not as a distant verse, but as a living promise over this hour. You are being strengthened for what you sensed. You are being upheld for what you must do next. So breathe deeply and let your spirit settle. Because this assignment was never meant to crush you. It was meant to reveal what God has placed within you and what He is willing to release through you when you trust Him enough to move. What you do in this moment will not end with this moment. That is the part heaven wants you to understand before you move any further. Your obedience is not touching only one life, one conversation, one act of compassion, one brief opening in time. It is unlocking something far greater. There are seasons when a single response given in faith begins to shift multiple things at once. It lifts another person out of despair. Yes, but it also opens a new level of alignment over your own life. Michael says every act of obedience carried out under divine instruction sends a movement through the unseen that reaches farther than human eyes can measure. What looks small in the natural is often immense in the spirit. What feels like a simple yes to God can become the first sound of chains breaking, doors opening, burdens lifting, and delayed answers beginning to move. This is why heaven has pressed this message upon you with such intensity, because your response is tied not only to rescue, but to release, not only to intervention, but to acceleration, not only to someone else's breakthrough, but to your own next season. God is not asking you to pour out and be forgotten. He is inviting you to step into a current of divine favor that follows obedience. When you move where He sends you, something is set in motion. What was stagnant begins to shift. What was blocked begins to loosen. What was waiting begins to advance. Some blessings do not arrive through comfort, they arrive through surrender. They arrive through courage. They arrive after the moment when a person chooses to obey quickly instead of shrinking back. That is why this is such a sacred crossing point. Your yes today may become the seed of tomorrow's restoration. Your willingness to answer someone's pain may become the very ground on which God brings healing, increase, and fresh clarity into your own life. Never believe the lie that obedience empties you without return. Heaven records every movement of love, every unseen sacrifice, every time you answer the call when it would have been easier to stay still. Galatians 6:9 says, "And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap, if we faint not." KJV. Hold on to that deeply. Due season is attached to obedience that does not quit. Reaping is attached to faithfulness that keeps moving. So understand this clearly: what you unlock in this hour will echo beyond what you can presently imagine. This is not just about helping. This is about opening. Opening mercy. Opening restoration. Opening favor. Opening the next chapter. God has already prepared but has chosen to connect to your obedience in this very hour. What is happening around you is not only a call to act, it is also a battle over whether you will act in time. That is why the resistance has felt so strange. That is why the hesitation has felt heavier than it should. This is not merely about being busy, distracted, or emotionally tired. There is pressure around your obedience because your obedience carries power. When heaven marks a moment as significant, opposition often gathers around the very place where your response matters most. Michael says you must not be naive about this hour. Not every delay is innocent. Not every distraction is harmless. Some things have been sent to dull your sensitivity, to cloud your discernment, to make you question what your spirit has already recognized as real. The battle is subtle, but it is fierce. It comes through second-guessing. It comes through overthinking. It comes through that quiet voice that says, maybe this is not important, or maybe I am reading too much into this, or maybe I should just wait until I feel more certain. But that voice has one assignment: to keep you still when heaven is telling you to move. And if you are honest, you have felt that war inside you. One part of you knows this message carries weight. One part of you knows this stirring is not ordinary. One part of you knows that someone needs a response. Yet another part keeps trying to reduce the urgency, soften the burden, and postpone the step you already know you are being asked to take. That is the conflict. That is the battlefield. The enemy does not always attack with noise. Sometimes he attacks with numbness. Sometimes he attacks with a delay. Sometimes he simply tries to make the called person hesitate long enough for the moment to weaken under the weight of inaction. Do not let that happen here. Do not hand over a sacred moment to fear dressed as caution. Do not let confusion sit on the throne where obedience should be ruling. Michael says this is the hour to become watchful over your own inner atmosphere. Guard what enters your mind. Guard what feeds your doubt. Guard what makes you spiritually sleepy when this is the very time you need to be awake. Because the truth is, the struggle around your hesitation is revealing how important your movement really is. If your response did not matter, there would not be this much pressure around it. If your obedience carried no consequence, there would not be this much resistance against it. So read the battle correctly. You are not under pressure because you are lost. You are under pressure because your yes threatens darkness. Your discernment threatens delay. Your movement threatens the grip that despair has tried to keep on someone connected to you. And that is why you must rise above the fog now. Not tomorrow. Now. Let me know in the comments. I choose obedience over delay. The moment in front of you is not ordinary, and it will not remain open forever. There are divine moments that arrive quietly, but carry the weight to change everything. And this is one of them. You can feel it now in the intensity of this word, in the way it keeps pressing against your spirit, in the way it refuses to leave you comfortable, passive, or half awake. Heaven is not stirring you this deeply for something small. Heaven is bringing you to a point of decision. Michael says this is the hour when hesitation must break, because what is hanging in the balance cannot afford another cycle of delay. This is the hour to move before fear talks you back into silence, before distraction dulls what you now recognize, before the urgency of this assignment gets buried under excuses that sound reasonable but carry no obedience in them. Some doors are mercifully opened by God, but they are not meant to be stared at forever. They are meant to be entered. Some assignments are revealed with tenderness, but they still demand courage. Some moments carry a grace that is so specific, so time-sensitive, so charged with divine purpose, that if you keep standing still, you will feel in your spirit that you are called to more than observation. You are called to movement. This is that kind of moment. Do not mistake this intensity for pressure without purpose. It is a purpose. It is heaven, making the call unmistakable. There is someone whose life has been wrapped in heaviness. Someone who has been asking God for relief, clarity, comfort, and a sign that they have not been forgotten. And now, in a way only heaven could orchestrate, that burden has intersected with your obedience. Not to crush you, but to awaken you, not to overwhelm you, but to position you, not to frighten you, but to make plain what must happen next. Michael says the reason this message keeps finding its way into your heart is that your response is part of the answer. Your willingness is part of the breakthrough. Your action is part of the mercy God intends to release in this hour. That is why you cannot keep treating this as something to revisit later. Later is where many divine moments are lost. Later is where conviction gets diluted. Later is where the fire of obedience is often smothered by comfort, routine, and doubt. But this word is not calling you into later. It is calling you into now. Now, while your spirit is awake. Now, while the burden is clear. Now, while the door is still open and grace is still flowing for this assignment. This is the moment. This is the hour. This is the turning point. And everything in the Spirit is trying to make that clear to you. You have spent enough time second-guessing what God has made plain. You have spent enough time trying to make the call softer than it is. You have spent enough time hoping clarity would come without requiring courage. But clarity has come, and courage is now your next act of agreement with heaven. The truth is, obedience always costs something to the flesh. It costs comfort. It costs delay. It costs the illusion that you can stand still and still fulfill what God has entrusted to you. Yet what it opens is always greater than what it costs. When you move in obedience, things begin to shift that you could never have forced by your own strength. Atmospheres change, hearts open, timing aligns. What looked blocked begins to move. What felt unreachable becomes reachable. What seemed buried under layers of resistance begins to respond to the authority of a simple, surrendered yes. That is why this hour matters so much. It is not just about one action. It is about what that action unlocks. It is about what your movement declares in the Spirit. It declares that fear will not govern you. It declares that delay will not own you. It declares that when God calls, you answer. When God warns, you listen. When God sends, you move. Michael says heaven is watching to see whether you will step fully into what has been entrusted to you. Not partially, not emotionally, fully. Because partial obedience still leaves the moment unfinished. Partial obedience still keeps one foot in hesitation. But full obedience breaks agreement with fear and comes into alignment with the will of God. That is the crossing point before you now. You can stay in the place of feeling stirred, or you can become the person who responds to the stirring. You can admire the weight of the message, or you can carry it where heaven intended it to go. You can remain at the threshold, or you can walk through the open door. But hear this clearly, the time for standing at the threshold is ending. Move before the window closes. Move before this moment is crowded out by lesser things. Move before your spirit has to wrestle with the grief of knowing you recognized the call but did not respond with the urgency it required. Heaven did not bring you this far to leave you undecided. Heaven brought you here to make your next step unmistakable. So let this settle in your soul with holy force. This is not random. This is not optional. And this is not the hour to remain still. This is the hour to rise, to reach, to answer, and to move with the kind of obedience that changes more than you can see. Now the message reaches its final moment. And it does not end with comfort alone. It ends with a decision. You have felt the weight of these words. You have felt the urgency pressing deeper than emotion, deeper than curiosity, deeper than coincidence. That is because this was never meant to be just another message you hear and forget. It was meant to awaken something in you that can no longer remain asleep. Michael says the time for hesitation is over. The time for circling the call is over. The time for telling yourself maybe later is over. You have been shown too much to go back to silence now. You have been stirred too deeply to pretend this was not for you. There is someone tied to this assignment. Someone whose pain has not been small. Someone whose waiting has not been light. And heaven placed this burden on your spirit because your response is meant to become part of their turning point. Do not walk away from that lightly. Do not let fear make you passive. Do not let delay steal what obedience could unlock. This is your moment to rise in the identity heaven has already spoken over you. Not weak, not forgotten, not unsure, but called, trusted, and sent. What happens next depends on whether you will move with courage or retreat into comfort. Michael says this is the hour to answer clearly, fully, and without compromise. Let this word become action. Let this stirring become movement. Let this message become proof that when heaven calls, you respond. And if this has spoken directly to your spirit, come on, I will answer the call. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need this same confirmation today. The hour is here. The warning was real. The assignment is clear. Now move.